We're here with Anmar Mirza, who is with the National Cave Rescue Commission as an instructor and national coordinator. And Anmar was a great help and resource to Last Words in terms of giving me understanding of what one should do in a cave. I promptly took that input and wrote a novel about what one should not do in a cave, so I'm trying to right my wrongs here. To start with, if you could talk a little bit about your background in cave rescue, how you became involved with it, and what the National Cave Rescue Commission does.
Well, I started caving in 1983, actually at this very cave right here, when I was in 8th grade. And when you're a caver in Bloomington, Indiana, the chances are pretty good at some point you'll be involved in a cave rescue because we have a lot of caves around here. So I actually went on my very first cave rescue when I was 15, and then I became an emergency medical technician when I became 18, took my first NCRC training, the National Cave Rescue Commission, that year, and then got involved with it after I went through all the various levels, got involved with it as an instructor, and then eventually the Central Region Coordinator, and then for the last 7 years I've been the National Coordinator. It's an organization I believe in highly because as a rescue organization it's kind of unique. First off, the NCRC does not actually do cave rescues. We're not a cave rescue response team, we're a training organization. So we provide people who, firefighters, cavers, EMTs, law enforcement, with the training to do cave rescues.
More the local first responders.
Right. Now that doesn't mean that, people who are involved in NCRC don't go on cave rescues, right, but we do so as volunteers under the agencies that have jurisdiction. So we also coordinate resources across the country. So for example, last fall there was a French caver who fell in a cave in Peru, not Peru, Indiana, Peru the country, and I was asked to help coordinate U.S. caver response for that if they were requested by the Peruvian government. So I was working with the State Department and cavers across the United States to try to put that together. So as national coordinator, that's part of my job, right, to coordinate those resources. So the NCRC is a commission of people who've been charged with teaching, developing the resources, providing that liaison activity through the National Speleological Society. It's our parent organization. And the NSS is basically the United States' caving organization. Scientific exploration, all that kind of stuff that goes along with it, recreational caving. And so the NSS is our lead for that. So the NSS is our lead for that. So we teach through the auspices of the NSS, but the NCRC has been around since the late 70s. I've been involved, I became an instructor in 1994, 95, and I've attended every national seminar we've had and most of the trainings in this region. So I've been on over 100 training operations. And then in addition to that, I've been on around 100 actual cave rescues, which there are 3 places in the United States that have a concentration of cave rescues where in a very small geographic area there's a lot of cave rescues. Central Indiana, South Central Indiana is one of those places. Right. The Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia area is another one, and then the West Virginia, Virginia area is the other. Now, there are cave rescues all over the country, but those areas have high concentrations of people who have a lot of experience with doing cave rescues. So,
what's the difference in terms of situations you are likely to run into between Virginia area, TAG, and this area in Indiana with the karst topography here?
Well, to start off with, almost all cave rescues, the vast majority of them are what we call seek and finds. They're somebody's lost and out of light. And those happen all over the place. Probably 90% of the rescues are like that. People who weren't prepared for the environment and think they maybe read it in a book somewhere about going caving and decided that they would go and they'd get a couple flashlights and go in the cave, they get lost or they break their lights. Now, in southern Indiana, Kentucky, that area, we have large mazy cave systems, so it's very easy to get lost in them, and we have very lengthy cave systems. In southern Indiana, the longest cave is now 43 miles.
Down in Indiana Caverns.
Yeah, that's the Binkley system, of which Indiana Caverns is a part of. Buckner here is 3.5 miles, and it's incredibly mazy, as you've seen as you went through it. So a lot of people tend to get lost. Now, caving itself is pretty safe. For the most part, the accident rate is much lower than just about any other activity, but when people get injured, they need those people who've got those specialized resources. Here, the injury rate in southern Indiana and Kentucky is fairly low. On average, we have maybe one incident every year and a half to 2 years of a major cave rescue where somebody has to be evacuated out.
Right.
And usually what happens for those people is they have fallen somehow, they've broken something, and they now need to be evacuated. They cannot get themselves out. That's very similar in the East Coast area, the West Virginia area, because the caves tend to be very similar. So our experience across the board there is pretty similar. Mm-hmm. Now you get down to Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and it's called the tag area amongst the caving communities. That area is a lot of deep pits, and that's what it's well known for.
Right.
So in that tri-state corner there, you have pits ranging anywhere. I mean, we have pits here in Indiana, but they're really known for them down there. And they have pits, ranging anywhere from a few tens of feet to the deepest pit in the United States, in Ellison's Cave, fantastic pits, 583 feet deep. So they have not only deep pits, but big cave systems that are associated with those deep pits. And so a lot of their rescues tend to be more in the vertical environment.
Right.
But
do you see more serious injuries there where the vertical element?
Honestly, the injury rate is very similar.
Okay.
So, sometimes it happens on road. We have vertical rescues here in Indiana. As a matter of fact, 3, I believe, of the 8 deaths in Indiana caves in the last 50 years or so have been rope related.
Right.
So it's similar, but they tend to do more of them and fewer of the seek and finds. Mm-hmm. But they still do a fair number of those as well.
That's one of the things I know you do, some private instruction, particularly related to the vertical work. Is that something that you find, is there more risk to people trying to figure that out on their own?
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest problems that the people who are on rope or in vertical situations in cave have is not the random accident that happens. It's the fact that I can teach you the basics of how to climb a rope or rappel down in 10 minutes. When I teach a weekend class or a 2-weekend class, what the rest of that time is teaching you how to avoid problems in the first place and then how to get out of problems once you've gotten into them. Because it's very unforgiving. It's very safe if you follow the right procedures, but it's very unforgiving.
Right. You mentioned how many rescues you've been involved with, a lot in this particular area. Is there one that stands out as one that was particularly emotionally rewarding for you?
Absolutely. Of course, I've got all sorts of great stories from all sorts of different rescues,
right.
But out of Buckner here, we've had very few injuries over the years. Mm-hmm. But we had a young lady about 3 years ago who slid off of a mud bank and fell about 6 feet. And she landed on a slope mud bank, and just one of those freak accidents, she broke her pelvis. Mm-hmm. And a pelvic injury is not only extremely painful, it's also potentially life-threatening because you can basically bleed out all of your blood volume into the pelvis rapidly because there's major arteries right in there.
Sure.
Well, she was a very small woman, so it helped us a lot because we were able to use a very small team to get her out and handle her very gently. But we got her out in about 2 hours once we got to her and got her packaged and out. We found out later that when she went to the hospital, she had a break in 3 places in her pelvis. She ended up having a steel rod put through the pelvis itself. So she had all these surgeries. We found out later when we rescued her, she'd been 3 weeks pregnant. And, because that's very dangerous for an infant or a fetus to be exposed to all the drugs that they're giving, the anesthesia and the like. But she had a healthy child, and, so we count that as a twofer because, we rescued 2 people with one rescue.
Yeah, outstanding. You mentioned how Buckner was sort of your introduction to caving in the state, and then obviously that's taken you around the country and around the world. And you've caved all over, so this is a sentimental favorite. What's out there on your sort of holy grail of caves that you haven't been to yet, but you would really like to?
Well, there's several caves in Eastern Europe. That especially the deepest cave in the world is in Eastern Europe. And when I say deep cave, it's not a deep pit. It's not one straight drop down,
right.
But you actually kind of stair-step your way down through the cave. So the depth between the entrance and the lowest point in the cave, that's what we consider a deep cave. Well, I've been to the deepest cave in the United States, which is Lechuguilla, and about 1,600 feet of vertical extent from the entrance.
New Mexico?
New Mexico, near Carlsbad.
Okay.
About 1,600 feet from the entrance area to the very bottom portion of the cave. And that's not just going down, it's actually going down, up, down, up. So you do a lot of vertical.
Reverse mountain climbing.
It's exactly what it is. And that's how these deep caves form, is they actually tend to oftentimes, Lechuguilla being an exception, but they oftentimes tend to form along mountains. So at no point are you more than a few hundred feet underground, but the height is there.
Change
right.
has been.
Well, if my memory is recollecting correctly, that particular cave system that I'm thinking of in Europe, in Eastern Europe, is over 1,600 meters deep. So over 3 times deeper than the one that I've been into. So I won't say it's the Holy Grail, but to me that's one of the interesting ones that I would like to go to that I have yet to have an opportunity to go to.
Right. In my novel Last Words, I have a caver in Indiana who has a new discovery and becomes proprietary about that. And he wants to explore it alone and map it alone, so he knows what is there without having to sort of share his secret. Obviously, caving in general, but mapping teams, you would always discourage anybody attempting to go that solo. But I've talked to some different cavers in the area who seem to buy into the idea that if someone discovered something that they thought was new and had potential, they really might try to keep it under wraps. Do you buy into that? Or?
Well, sure. I mean, there's a lot of secrecy within caving for a number of reasons. Not the least of which is the fact that when the general public finds out about a cave, oftentimes inexperienced people go there, they can get hurt. They trash the cave without knowing what they're doing.
Right.
And sometimes the people deliberately do it as well, which, of course, is very personally, deeply offensive to me.
Yeah.
But
did a major cleanup here.
Oh, yeah. We've spent years cleaning up the abuse that this cave has seen. But there's also like down in Kentucky where I do a lot of caving, there are other cave groups that may want to go in from another cave and try to connect into the one that you're working in. And there's a lot of prestige in the caving community to be that person who makes the connection. And so, and we call that being scooped. And it's just like, in the media. So when we get scooped, it's a big deal. Yeah. So oftentimes now we would never do it solo because first off, it's almost impossible to survey a cave accurately solo. You need at least 2 people, and usually 3 to 4 is best. But you will oftentimes keep
Explain that a little bit. Beyond safety, because I know there are issues of time and dead ends and approach. So could you explain that a little bit more about why?
Well, so when I go into a cave to map it, I have to take in either a compass and inclinometer and tape. So I need somebody on the other end to hold the other end to read the instruments.
Right.
I've got to then take those measurements and record them and then make a sketch of that particular passage where those survey points are. Or now there's electronic instruments that I can use, but I still have to have a target point. So I aim a laser, they call them distos. I aim a laser disto. It takes all the measurements all at once, but I still have to have a survey point that's set up. So I'm going to be spending a lot of time running back and forth, and then I'm also trying to sketch at the same time.
Right.
It's a lot of work, whereas a team of 2 to 3 people can just do it much more rapidly. So the safety issues aside.
It's just more efficient.
Yeah, and if you're doing it with compass and tape, you have to have 2 people because somebody's got to hold what we call the dumb end of the tape.
Yep, exactly.